A good stroke of business. A peasant took his cow to market and sold it for 7 thalers. On the way home, he had to pass a pond, and before he even got near it, he heard the frogs croaking, "Eck, eck, eck, eck." "Bless me," he said to himself, "they don't know what they're talking about. It was 7 thalers I made, not 8. When he got to the water, he called out to them, "What stupid animals you are! Don't you know any better than that? It was 7 thalers, not 8. But the frogs stuck to their eck, 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 eck. "Well, if you won't believe me," he said, "I can count them out for you." He took the money from his pocket and counted out the 7 thalers, 24 groschen to each one. But the frogs paid no attention to his reckoning and went right on with their eck, 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 eck. Well, now the peasant was really angry. "All right," he cried, "if you think you're so smart, count them yourself." And with that, he threw all his money into the water. Then he stood still and waited, for he thought when they finished counting his money, they'd bring it back. But the frogs were stubborn. They kept on croaking, "Eck, eck, eck, eck," and they didn't return his money either. He waited a long while, until night began to fall and he had to go home. Then he gave the frogs a good piece of his mind. "You splashing bug-eyed blockheads, big mouths, that's what you are. You can shout until my ears ache, but you can't count 7 thalers. Do you expect me to wait here all night?" So he went away. But the frogs kept croaking, "Eck, eck, eck, eck," after him, and he was in a very bad humor when he got home. After a while, he bought another cow and butchered it. He figured that if he got a good price for the meat, he'd be making as much as the 2 cows were worth and still have hide left over. When he got to town with the meat, a pack of dogs were gathered outside the gate, with a big greyhound in the lead, who danced around the meat, sniffing and barking, "Arf, arf, arf, arf." When he wouldn't stop, the peasant said to him, "Well, I understand. You're saying half-half, because you want half the meat. Where would I be if I gave it to you?" The dog's only reply was, "Arf, arf." "Well, will you promise not to eat it up, and can you vouch for your friends here?" "Arf, arf," said the dog. "Well, all right, since you insist, I'll let you have all of it. I want my money within 3 days or you'll hear from me. Just bring it out to my place." With that, he unloaded the meat and turned back. The dogs pounced on it and barked, "Arf, arf!" The peasant heard them from far off and said it to himself, "Would you listen to that? Now they all want half, but the big one will have to answer to me." When the 3rd day came, the peasant thought, "Tonight I'll have my money." He was as happy as could be, but no one came, and no one brought him any money. "There's no relying on anyone these days," he said. In the end, he lost his patience, went to town, and asked the butcher for his money. The butcher thought he was joking, but the peasant said, "Why would I be joking? I want my money. Didn't your big dog deliver the meat 3 days ago from the cow I just killed?" Well, that made the butcher angry. He picked up a broomstick and chased him away. "Just wait," said the peasant. "There's still some justice left in the world." So he went to the royal palace and asked for an audience. They took him to the king, who was sitting there with his daughter, and the king asked him what his trouble was. "Trouble enough," he said. "The frogs and the dogs have robbed me, and the butcher has paid me with a stick." Then he told the king at great length what had happened. The king's daughter laughed loudly, and the king said, "I can't say you're in the right, but you shall marry my daughter. Never in all her life has she laughed like this, and I've promised her hand to the man who could make her laugh. You can thank God for your good fortune." "Never mind," said the peasant. "I don't want her. I've already got one wife, and even that's too many for me. Whenever I come home, it's as if there were one standing in every corner." At that, the king grew angry and said, "You're nothing but an unmannerly lout." "Oh, your majesty," said the peasant, "what can you expect from a pig but pork?" "Look," said the king, "you shall have another reward. Go now, but come back in 3 days, and you shall have 500. When the peasant came out of the palace, the sentry said, "You made the king's daughter laugh. I bet you've been nicely rewarded." "Well, I should say so," said the peasant. "I'm getting 500. "Then share it with me," said the soldier. "What can you do with all that money?" "Because it's you," said the peasant. "I'll let you have 200. Go in to the king in 3 days, and they'll count it out for you." A merchant was standing nearby and heard the conversation. He ran after the peasant, grabbed him by the coattails, and said, "God's wonders, what a lucky man you are! Let me change it for you. I'll give it to you in small coins. What would you do with hard tailors?" "All right," said the peasant. "You can have 300. Give them to me in coins right now. Go see the king in 3 days, and you'll be repaid." The merchant was delighted with the profit he was making and paid out the sum in bad groschen, 3 of which are worth as much as 2 good ones. When 3 days had passed, the peasant went to the king as the king had ordered. "Take off his coat," said the king. "He shall have 500. "Oh, no," said the peasant. "They don't belong to me anymore. I've given the sentry 200 and the merchant changed 300 for me. I've got nothing coming to me at all." Just then the soldier and the merchant came in. They demanded what they had got out of the peasant, and both were given their just measure of lashes. The soldier bore it bravely. He'd been whipped before. But the merchant cried pitifully, "Oh, oh, oh, are these my hard tailors?" The king couldn't help laughing at what the peasant had done. His anger had boiled down, and he said, "You lost your reward before you even got it, so I'll make it up to you. Go to my treasure room and take as much money as you please." The peasant didn't have to be asked twice. He stuffed his pockets with as much as they would hold. Then he went to the tavern and counted his money. The merchant, who had crept in after him, heard him muttering to himself, "That rascally king has put one over on me. Why didn't he give me the money himself? Then I'd know how much I've got. How can I know if it's right when I picked it up without looking?" "God help us," said the merchant to himself. "This man's speaking disrespectfully of our king. I'll go and denounce him. I'll get a reward, and better still, he'll be punished." When the king heard what the peasant had said, he flew into a rage and told the merchant to go and bring the offender. The merchant ran to the peasant. "You must come to the king this minute." "Don't tell me," said the peasant. "I know what's right. First, I'm going to have a new coat made. Do you think a man with so much money in his pockets can go to the king in an old ragged old coat like this?" The merchant saw the peasant wouldn't budge without a new coat, and he was afraid that if the king's anger had time to blow over, he would lose his reward and the peasant his punishment. So he said, "I'll lend you a fine coat for a little while just to do you a good turn. What won't a man do out of kindness?" The peasant accepted, put on the merchant's coat, and went out to the king. The king reproached the peasant for his wicked words. The merchant had reported. "Nonsense," said the peasant. "Anything a merchant says is a lie. You'll never hear a word of truth coming out of his mouth. Why, I wouldn't put it past him to claim that I'm wearing his coat." "What's this?" cried the merchant. "You say it's not my coat? Didn't I lend it to you to do you a good turn so you could come and see the king?" When the king heard that, he said, "Well, the merchant must have deceived somebody, either me or the peasant, and had the peasant paid a little more in hard tailors." The peasant went home in the good coat, with the good money in his pocket, and said, "I got it right this time."